Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 10, Our Man Bashir. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. Twitter is its own thing. We're moving past that.
We're as they say, we don't talk about Twitter anymore. It has become a hodgepodge of craziness anyway, and every single day it seems to get a little bit worse. So I think we may just have to give up on trying to do anything on that platform at this time. If they finally magically fix it and make it user friendly once again, perhaps we'll return. But for now, no, there will be no twittering from us from this podcast anyway. So there. But David is right. We are here to talk about season 4, episode 10. 10. Already 10 episodes into season 4. It's amazing
Right? Yep.
how far we've come. And we are going to definitely have to take some time and kind of do kind of the story so far and account how what we've learned about everything from emissary to this episode, Our Man Bashir. But of course, before we get into all that, I have to ask, David, how was your week?
Oh, it was fine. Slow at work. We had a meeting this morning at 8, so this is definitely a long day for me. Oh, yeah, just one of those days. Slow at work, customer issues, meetings early in the morning. But the new Legend of Zelda game is fantastic. It's really good. It's a lot of fun. Me and
Okay.
a bunch of friends are playing it, and so everyone's like, "Hey, where are you at? How are you doing? How's it going?" And it's just been fun. Uh, yeah. How about you? How are things going?
I may have to check that out. I haven't really had much time for gaming. I know that the last time, I told you I'd gotten the Mass Effect series, and I was trying to work my way through that. Unfortunately, I haven't had much time to play this week. I've been really focusing on the workouts and the weightlifting and things like
Right.
that. That's been going pretty well. I'm still sore all the time, but there's something about being, teased by a man 20 years older than you and making you feel weak that makes you just want to keep doing it. So that's
Yeah.
pretty much where I am right now. Just grin and bear it and make it through it. And so far I've been, once the soreness passes, I feel great. So there is
Right.
that. Other than that, keeping busy with work and kid and everything else, school's getting ready to end, so we're really excited about that. Already trying to make plans for the next year and what we want to do there for her school wise and
Right.
home wise, talking about a move and all the other kind of stuff. Just trying to get us in the right frame of mind to make the proper plans for things. So a lot of little things like that, but nothing major. So I'm really glad for that. We're all happy, we're all healthy, and we're ready to just kind of, move through. And of
Great.
course, be here to talk about Trek every single weekend. And of course, other things like things we've talked about in our After Dark specials, of
Yeah.
course. And like I said, we're going to have to do kind of a couple of them. Got to do recounts for our show. And then we've got some other stuff here with like the books and everything else. So we got to get back on the ball for a couple of things. And hopefully this summer we can really do that.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. So
Yeah.
in our all things Avasarala Sheree,
Ah.
announcements, her birthday was recently and she posted, of course, several pictures of herself doing a kind of a layout, and again, she's amazing. I adore her. She's fantastic. I don't care. I don't know why I didn't know anything about her until The Expanse, and I kicked myself for that. But it's been great because it allows me to go back and like find her in like movies and TV shows and interviews and everything else. And I'm not trying to say that I'm obsessed, but I am trying to say that if someone knows her and has a way for me to at least say, "Hi, I'm such a huge fan of yours" to her, I'm here for it. Like, please sign
Yeah.
me up. Yeah, absolutely.
Perry, you need to tell him what happened with that photo you just mentioned.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, obviously, I'm on Twitter personally, and she posted the spread for her birthday photo shoot and everything else. She released the photos, and then I just, I used the Expanse to make a comment about how great she looks. And if any of you who are Expanse fans, there's a scene where Amos walks into her office, and she says to him, "You look like shit," and he says, "You look amazing." Well, GIF, however you want to pronounce it, that someone made of that moment. So of course, when
Right.
she put the pictures, that I use that as my response, and I actually got a nice light-hearted reply from her. The little emoji, smiling, laughing, or whatever else. But it was from her
Yeah.
directly, and I know that it's a silly thing. I know that it's a little thing, but
Right.
the fact that it happened at all,
You
yeah,
you
I
like
was.
that touch of God and Adam at the
Yeah,
Sistine Chapel. Briefly, briefly.
I know to other people who don't know anything about her and don't care, and they're just like, "You're telling us this, why?" I understand. Trust me. I've been there on the other side for other people when they talk about things like this for them, and I'm like, "Really?" But now that it's me, I don't care as well, and it was great. It was a
Yeah.
great little moment,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's actually not the only time that I've had this kind of, I guess, more indirect contact with her. There was a posting that was done about her scene in The Expanse where she gives the speech about losing her son because after all those people were killed, all the soldiers and stuff were killed, and she gave that speech, and it was a very moving moment. She wasn't the president of Earth, as we called her, but then she was just kind of like the Earth Mother type in the scene. It's a very moving scene. She gives a very eloquent speech, and I went looking for it, and I found that several people had not only posted it, but they had commented about the power of the speech, and I did the same. I just was like, "You guys are absolutely right," and I kind of just described different things that I noted from like, filming and books and things like that that I knew and why this worked and all that other kind of stuff. And kind of just gave like a little breakdown of, the speech and why it was so good. And at least in my opinion and everything like this. And she actually responded. It was a verified response from her, thanking everybody for their love of her work and for the analysis. And she was just kind of went on a little bit about how she didn't realize that people had, enjoyed it so much, but she was so grateful. And obviously, she was just proving that she was wonderful and that she's
Mhm.
aware of everything that goes on when you mention her. And again, even in that moment, I was like, she's awesome. She's a spectacular person. I just love it. So,
Yeah.
and that was on Reddit where she did that. She did one, and then it was kind of in that AMA, ask me anything type deals,
Right.
So yeah, it was a great little moment there. But
So
all
Perry,
that to say, I love Sharaya Dashlu, and I don't
all
care
right.
if you know.
So I'm gonna ask you a really hard question, Perry.
Oh gosh.
President Roslin or Avasarala?
Ooh. Yeah. Uh.
For
Wow.
everyone who needs to know, that's
Laura Laura
Battlestar
Roslin from
Galactica.
Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, the original, the
Yeah.
one that came out in 2000, 2004.
Yeah.
2004 because
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
ended in
Yeah.
2009.
Right.
Yeah, uh, fantastic character as well, and
Right.
played expertly by Mary McDonnell. She's a wonderful person as well. Wow. Um, what I will say
Stumped
to
you, did I?
that, what I will say to that is, tune into the end of the episode and find out which one that I chose. Otherwise,
He's gonna
because
give
we could
himself an
sit here.
hour to work it out.
Yeah, we would be here forever with me having to like debate in my head.
A
Let
whole
this,
after dark episode has to be
yeah,
legitimately
we're gonna
just
have to
to
put
this
this on the
question.
back burner for a while because those are, yeah. I've often said when before anything, I often said that she was the only Laura I'd ever love. So we're gonna have to like, anyway. We're not here to talk about any of that. We are
No, no,
actually
we're
here to
not.
talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine
Yep.
and this great episode. So, do you want to hit us with a quick recap
Yeah,
before
I
we
can do
dive
it
in,
this time.
do our deep
Yeah.
dive there? All
All
right,
right,
go ahead.
guys. Again, this is the episode Our Man Bashir, and as you can imagine, it is heavily focused on Our Man Bashir. So, Dr. Bashir is in the Hollow Suite, and he is enjoying a James Bond type secret agent hologram Hollow Suite game. And when Garrick, of all people, shows up right in the middle of a climactic moment where he takes out a bad guy and he's getting the girl. And here comes Garrick, uh, interrupting everything. Bashir is annoyed, but lets him join in for the remainder of his holosuite time. Meanwhile, outside of the holosuite, our core group of officers from Cisco, Kira, Dax, O'Brien, and Worf are returning to the station on one of the runabouts. Suddenly, they realize that there is trouble with their warp core and they've been sabotaged, and they have to be beamed to the station as their runabout starts to explode. Unfortunately, it explodes right about the moment that they are actually being transported. And because the buffers in the transporter could only hold the information about their physical beings and their mental state for so long, Eddington and Odo have to make some pretty drastic choices in order to save the lives of our crew. So what they do is they tell the computer to delete as much information as necessary and then store the data wherever it can as quickly as it can. And where does it store the data? In the holosuite with Dr. Bashir and Garrick. And so all
Mm.
five of our officers are suddenly characters in this James Bond style secret agent 1960s game thing that Bashir is playing. And what happens is their physical bodies are being saved in the holosuite. So the physical bodies of our character of our crew are being used in the holosuite as Dr. Bashir plays out his you know 007 style game, but their minds are not there. The minds are actually saved onto the station as a whole. The entire station was necessary to house the five minds of our five characters, but their physical bodies are being saved in the holosuite. And so Eddington and Odo, with the help of Quark and Rom,
Mm.
are trying to save the crew, and they tell Bashir and Garrick that they can't stop the holosuite program because if they do, that would endanger our crew. The five bodies of our crew might be lost into the programming, and so in order to make sure that they don't die, they have to continue playing out this James Bond style game. But of course, the safeties are now turned off, and that means that if anyone actually dies, they die for real. So, as you can imagine, this creates for a fun little episode where every now and then we get some stuff from Odo and the others and Eddington as they try and solve the problem, and ultimately they are successful. But in the meantime, we have a again James Bond style action film plot playing out with Dr. Bashir as Mr. Bashir, which I think is hilarious because the entire time we've always done him as Dr. Bashir, but he used to be referred to as Mr. Bashir the whole time. And the long story of it is Kira is his Russian lover, and O'Brien is the man who tried to kill him, and Worf is the second-hand person to Cisco's criminal mastermind villain who's using the Professor Dax to create these lasers that are going to destroy the Earth's crust and cause a massive swelling of the oceans. And so only Mount Everest will be the last piece of land above water. And he's going to restart the world again with just a few people left at Mount Everest. Now, this whole time, Garrick has been telling Bashir, look, like, there's no reason for us to die in order to try and save these five people. We don't know if we'll be successful. If we have to, we might have to make hard decisions and save our own lives. At the end of everything, that's exactly what Garrick is saying is like, look, we're running out of time. We can't, we don't want to die to this fake lava. The holosuite will kill us because it's good. The safeties are off. So we have to cut our losses and make do. And of course, Bashir is like, that's not at all acceptable. I'm going to do everything I can to save them. Even if I have to shoot you and kill you, Garrick, I'll do it. And he has to shoot Garrick. He grazes his neck. And Garrick is very impressed with Bashir's willingness to take the hard actions. And part of the climax of the James Bond plot is when he's telling Cisco as the supervillain that he basically gives the same speech that Garrick gave as his reason to continue keeping Cisco invested long enough for them to be saved. But we can talk in more detail about that. In the end, everyone's saved, uh, and everyone goes back to their lives. But now Garrick and Bashir have the Hollow Suite to enjoy together. And again, part of the whole thing here is that Garrick is an actual spy, and Bashir was pretending to be a spy in his Holosuite program, and that creates some tension between them. We'll get into more into that as we go on, but that's mainly the
Yes.
plot. Anything I missed?
Nope, that's essentially it. And like you said, we're going to get into a lot of these points here. So, yeah. Um, so, of course, I like to, as I say every week, I love to ask first and foremost, what did you think of this episode?
Um, well, I thought it was fun. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a fun one. I was reading up on Wikipedia right before we started that Deep Space Nine's writers had specifically avoided doing a lot of Hollow Suite glitching
Mm.
storylines because they felt like Deep Space Nine had a lot of those. And
Well,
yeah, yeah.
you mean that Next Generation had a lot of
Oh, I'm
those,
sorry. Yes,
and you are correct.
yes,
Next Generation is full of episodes where the supposedly perfect, wonderful holodeck malfunctioned in one way or another, and because of
right,
this malfunction, we got craziness that happened. We had
right.
Picard and Riker trapped in the Bionar episode. We had Data and
Moriarty,
Geordi and Dr.
Moriarty.
Pulaski trapped in the creation of Moriarty, and
Yes,
they were
yes,
trapped a couple of times because of Moriarty. We've got
yes,
Barkley running amok in the
yes,
holodecks multiple times as well. So yeah,
yes.
that was kind of like their go-to when it seemed like when they
Yeah,
were bored in a season. Now,
right.
what can we do? Let's have a
Yeah,
malfunctioning holodeck again. So yeah,
yeah,
that was a lot. There was a
right,
lot.
right. And so this is the first time that Deep Space Nine has gone with a similar plot line. Um,
Now, it's important to note that while the holodeck is featured here, the holodeck did not actually malfunction
that's true.
in this scenario. The holodeck did exactly what it was supposed to do. The computer is what shunted their physical patterns into the holodeck, and the
Right,
program was still working perfectly. The only difference
right.
was that the safety protocols in the program had been deactivated. That
Disabled.
was it.
Yes, yes.
Everything else was running as it was supposed to.
Right. Yeah.
So
In
that's a
fact,
key distinction.
it's made clear that characters that Bashir has already interacted with, like Kira, is portraying Anna, but Anastasia is a woman he's already interacted with. So it's just her physical form is now Kira's.
Right.
Um, and I have to say it now. I don't think her accent, her Russian I'm no expert on Russian accents, but it felt strained. I don't.
Well, I think I understand what you're saying, in that moment, but at the same
It may not
time,
be the
we're
right
obviously
word. Yeah.
used to hearing them speak a certain way. So
Right.
to suddenly hear something, especially something as
Jarring.
rustic as
Yeah.
the Russian accent,
Right.
I think it's particularly jarring when we
Right.
hadn't heard her speak that way ever before. Now, if we had heard her in something else in some other capacity too, even just a different accent in general, I think it would have made it a little bit more accepting to hear. But we've never heard her sound this
Right.
way before. So
Yes.
yeah, um, they were all kind of weird. I thought it was funny that Worf has a French name but doesn't sound French at all.
He didn't even try.
He didn't even, yeah, didn't even try. And it makes me wonder, like, behind the scenes, did someone say to him, "Hey, can you speak with a French accent?" And either A, he said no right away, or B, he tried it and then they said, "You know what?
No.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't you do
I
that
can
at
see
all."
Michael Dorn giving that look. It's his
Yeah,
Worf look of like, I will not.
right. For Michael Dorn, I have to imagine that, or I like to imagine, I don't have to, but I like to imagine that when he puts on the makeup, right, and he becomes Worf, that there is a total persona shift. And so things that he would have found funny and whatever as Michael, it's just dead. And I think that's why, again, I've tried to nail down why I think Worf works so well. But I think that's why, because it's like he can still do the delivery, but Worf is just serious, and that
Yeah.
deadpan delivery is spot on every time, and
Right.
it works.
Right.
But yeah, I just have to imagine that someone like he was, maybe considering it when they were talking to him as Michael, but then he put the makeup on, and they were like, "Okay, now hit me with that French accent." And he just gave him a look, and they were like, "You know what?
Never
Never
mind.
mind.
Yeah.
You do you.
Yeah.
You do that. Yeah, that classic Worf. We'll take that. Worf in a suit. There we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah,
Yeah. I liked the whole. I mean, it was so clearly a reference to James Bond. There's so many
oh, yeah,
references. My name is Bashir, Julian Bashir, and it just doesn't work like James Bond does. Like Garrick is right to make fun of him
oh
in
yeah.
this in this hundred
Garrick
percent.
is totally right to make
Yeah.
fun of him for this, and yeah, it's a classic rip on all of those Bond movies. In fact, this episode came out just a few days after um, the GoldenEye movie came out, the
Mm.
first one, the first Bond film in several years
With
that
Pierce
starred
Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan. So this was hot on its heels. GoldenEye came out, and then I think it's like 5 or 6 days later we got this episode. So yeah, very much a tribute to it. Again, all of those Bond movies. There was another movie called Our Man Flint, which is kind of like a direct reference here. Our Man Bashir, Our Man
Right.
Flint, another '60s kind of spy movie, which in itself, Our Man Flint was kind of a parody of the at the time Bond movies.
Right.
Kind of an Americanized, stylized version. And I really feel like this episode more lines up with Our Man Flint than it does some of the Bond stuff. Like overall, like there are a lot of heavy Bond references, but pacing and plot tends to match up with Our Man Flint. And yes, that means
Interesting.
obviously I've seen Our Man Flint.
Okay.
Not a bad movie starring James Coburn back in his heyday. You should go watch it if you're a fan of, especially if you're a fan of the older Bond films. Sean Connery, Roger Moore. It's right in there in that kind of feel and time. So yeah, go back and watch it, and I'm sure you'll have a good time if you like those already. But yeah, I feel like it's more in line with that film than the other wink and the nods that they do for James Bond, Man from Uncle, so forth and so on.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. The other moments that are pretty obvious are Cisco is dressed up in a shirt or suit that looks just like Doctor No from the original Doctor
Yeah,
No. Like I've
yeah,
never even seen Doctor No all the way through, but I
yeah.
know
But
the
you know that
villain.
look, right?
Yes.
You know that look. That's yeah. You're
Yes.
right. That is the
And the
iconic
only
villainous look.
right, and the only difference is basically that it has buttons and it's a brown and not white. Like
Yeah,
Doctor
yeah,
No's just
that's
the white
mainly it. It's
version.
like his is brown. It's got like the gold accents with the buttons and stuff. But other than that, it's like a spot on,
Yeah.
hit for it. You're right.
And I have to say, Avery Brooks once again fully commits to the
He
role.
does.
He is absolutely chewing the scenery. He is Dr. Noah, not Noah.
Noah, right? Yes, Noah, right. He
Great.
certainly really just kind of uh enveloped this role. He took it
Oh
on
yeah.
fully, did
Well,
not shy away from any of it at all.
yes.
And I would say the same thing for O'Brien too. Like I feel like he embraced being Falcon for the parts that we see him in anyway. I
Right.
think he embraced being Falcon quite well. But
Right.
yeah, Avery Brooks once again just really kind of just was like, "Oh, you want me to play a '60s Bond villain? I'll give you a '60s Bond villain."
Yeah.
And he was just maniacal.
Yes.
He was so
Everything.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
For people I've seen few, but for people who criticize him at all. I'm like, I don't know what you guys are watching, but the man like thoroughly enjoys his scenes. I
Yes.
know he comes off as eccentric or whatever, but I don't care. He
Yeah.
is fantastic. And you know
Right.
what? This is yet again that we have found ourselves praising Avery Brooks for these kind of standout scenes. We commended him when we watched the episode where Nog is trying to convince him to recommend him for Starfleet. Even the brief bit where in Rejoined, where he is, saying to Dax, I will stand with you. I will support you all the way. Like just those brief moments with him, he's so engaging and believable, and his delivery is just so, it's just great. It's very powerful every time. And even when he's playing a villain here, you're just like, he's awesome. When he was Duran during Jadzia's
Yes,
Jantara,
I
and
was
they had
gonna
like,
say that's the episode I was thinking of. Yeah.
yeah, he's great. Avery
Yes.
Brooks really does. He's a fantastic actor. He does a
Right.
great job in all of his scenes.
Yeah, you can tell that. I mean, you just said it. But he fully commits to whatever role he's given. You give him some lines, you give him a script, you give him a character. I don't know how much he goes back to the director and talks about, here's my character, what's going on, back and forth it. But when it comes to him being on camera, he is there. It's just great to watch because I was waiting for him to show up. Of all five of our people, where's Cisco going to show up? Well, he's got to be the big bad because he's again kind of our main character of Deep Space Nine. So it makes sense that if he's going to fulfill a role amongst all these people, it would make sense that Cisco is going to be the one who Bashir has to go up against at the end.
Oh yeah, when they were starting to kind of like trickle in, we saw
Yeah.
Kira, and then we saw Falcon, of course, and then of course
Yes.
Duchamp,
Right.
and then the picture of Jadzia
Dax.
as Honey
Yeah.
Bear, I
Oh, I
knew
love that. I
already,
love those
I knew
names.
already that Cisco was the bad guy, but yeah, the names Honey Bear, Mona loves it.
Well, that's
Come on.
another. Yeah, Mona loves it. Well, that's another reference to Doctor No because Honey Rider was the name of the very first Bond girl. So yeah,
I don't know who
it's
what was his name? Ian Fleming. He wrote the Bond.
yeah,
I've
yes.
never read any of the Bond books. I've heard
I
a
haven't
lot of
either.
things about them, from they're really good to they're really terrible, and just there's a bunch of stuff in them that obviously is very, very dated. So be careful when going to read them.
Yes.
I will tell you that.
Oh,
But
I'm sure that's true.
yeah. But all that to say, if in those books he has named women such obvious things as Mona loves it and Honey Bear, or in any equivalent, like however close, that's the worst thing I've ever heard of in my life. I've never ever in my life met a woman named anything even remotely close to that. So if
Yes.
he thought that was okay, like I just would love to analyze that part of his brain to be like, where did you think that was going to be clever? You know,
Dude, we could talk about just in the movies. We don't have to name them,
even
but
the
like the
Bond
names
movies,
of some of the
the
characters.
women, yes,
Yes.
they all have terrible names.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Like such like can you turn a male fantasy up to 11 please? Like
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, you've already got her, wearing next to nothing. Did you really have to give her
Right.
such a heavily
Yes.
entendre name, like that? Like, can you just? I
Yeah.
mean, her name could have been Lisa, and it still would have worked. Like, I didn't need her to
Yes.
be, Honey Mouth or whatever the hell you were gonna call her in the scene, right? I just,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, it was just awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's and that is really the epitome of how silly all that is at the very end when Garrick and Bashir are tied to the laser contraption, and who walks in but
Honey
Honey
Bear,
Bear,
Dax,
Dax,
and he
and
and she's
and
this she's
and
supposed to be
Garrick is
this
like, "What are
smart,
you?"
serious, no nonsense scientist, and yet all of a sudden, because Bashir says a couple of words and looks at her with the soft light camera and everything else, now all of
Yeah,
a sudden she's willing to just take off the
give
glasses,
him a
let the hair down, and now she's not a
give him a
scientist.
key,
Right.
or at least come over and kiss him, and he takes the key. I
No,
thought she gave him the key.
they kiss, and then she slips the key into the pocket because
Right,
Falcon
because
comes around, and yeah, it's like, what's going on
accuses
here?
her
Right.
later. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's so just, I mean, Garrick is like, again, Garrick is a real person, so he's able to comment without the characters who are in the
Right.
program noticing that he's making comments. And so he's like, "Are you kidding me? This is real. They didn't teach me how to do this back at, in the Obsidian Order.
Right.
I just gotta kiss the girl and get the key."
Which
And it's
I have to point out, um, remember that in all the times that we have seen Garrick interact, in particular with Bashir, Bashir has
Mhm.
always, again and again, tried to get Garrick to admit that he was actually a spy and not just a simple tailor. And Garrick has
Right.
always dissembled. He's always refused. He's
Right.
danced around it, whatever. But in this episode, he is
He's
so
so mad.
incensed. He is so upset with the trodden on his chosen profession and his skill set,
Right.
right? That he can't
Yeah.
help but
I
blurt out left, right, and center why this is inaccurate. When I
I
was a
joined the
spy, right?
wrong spy
I
agency.
joined
Yeah.
I joined the wrong intelligence service of the Insidious Order. You would never have gotten away with that. Well, when I was a spy, you had to make hard choices, and somebody might die, and you can't save it. Like he's just out there over and over again saying, "When I was a spy," I'm like, dude,
Yes, you're
shut
totally
up.
right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, are you
Yeah.
that obsessed with Bashir that you have totally lost? You've lost the plot, man. You've lost the game. You've given it up because you want this man to realize that what you did was
Yeah.
serious instead of
Right.
letting him have his crazy fantasy. So yeah, I was like,
Right.
that's all it took. That's all it took was Bashir playing around in the holodeck for this man to finally admit that yes, he was a spy. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
Garrick, way to go
Well, it really explains going all the way back to the very beginning when he shows up and he starts clapping for Bashir after he popped the guy Falcon with
with the
a
champagne cork.
campaign.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
champagne
that
cork.
was what knocked him out.
Uh-huh.
And later, when Falcon returned, he's like, "I bet you thought I didn't survive that crack that champagne bottle to the head or whatever." Garrick shows up and he's all clapping, overly, and basically forces the woman that Bashir was trying to romance to leave. And he's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, did I do that? Did I make? Oh, I'm so
I'm so
sorry."
sorry. Too bad, he says, too bad you don't have another bottle of champagne to shoot me with. I was just
Yeah,
like, you sassy little I mean, just
yeah,
what a terrible,
yeah.
terrible friend you are. You're just teasing him relentlessly.
Well, it's funny too because Bashir's like, it's illegal to walk in on someone's hollow suite like that. Really, it's illegal, is it? That's strange. I wonder how that illegality came around. Like, who?
Um, Probably stemming from the number of times that on Next Generation they just straight up invaded Barkley's privacy every chance they got. I mean, it was
Can't
just
a
like,
man fantasize about his coworkers in peace?
right. Can he fantasize about falling asleep in Dr. Crusher's lap while he sword fights
A
Picard and
miniaturized,
company?
yeah,
Right.
a
And a
miniaturized
miniaturized
Riker.
Riker. Right. I mean, it's his holodeck time. And they just, I mean, over and over again, they just were walking in. And it wasn't just on, I mean, they did it a lot to Brock, don't get me wrong, but they all did it to each other at some point or another.
Yes,
There's the
yes,
one where Picard in Pen Pals, one of my favorite TNG episodes, Picard is riding his horse. And
yes.
the first time he's attempting to get on the horse and Data comes in and interrupts him. The
Right.
second time he's actually riding the horse and Troy interrupts him. And then Picard walks in on Riker during the Binar episode. Riker's just in there saxophoning away and schmoozing
Yeah,
with the program. And all of a sudden, here
yeah,
comes Picard just walking in and inspecting the place and talking. You're like, dude, like, there was a door. Most people have learned by now to knock, you son of a bitch. I mean, just Jordy gets interrupted. His little holodeck
yeah,
program that he had with Leia, the real Leia, walks in on him.
yes,
Like just like apparently no one knocks, and I guess
yeah.
enough senior officers were like, "Listen, there are times when I'm doing things in there, and I don't want to be disturbed. So we got to like nip this in the bud with some
Yep.
legality here. And now it's illegal in Deep Space Nine. But
Yeah.
yeah, they were all doing some unseemly things in the holodeck. Yeah.
Oh man, the holodecks definitely make you ask questions about the nature of Star Trek in some ways. Like, what is this the future? Because this could create some real problems. Like, how many people actually just lose themselves in the fantasies that they present that they have
I
in
mean,
the hollow suites? Like, just give
yeah.
up on life and just do hollow suites for all time.
I mean, the ideas of the holodeck and makes sense. You've got these long missions. You don't know when you're going to find another solar system, let alone another planet that you can, go on and get fresh air and everything else. So instead of just always running around in a gym on your ship, you have this kind of, well, it is a fake environment where you can have at least artificial sun and it kind of expands with you. So you feel like you're moving, like again, Picard horseback riding, in the holodecks and stuff like that. So I mean, I think that it would make sense because the changing of the scenery and things like that would allow people to adapt to long-term space travel better than
Hmm.
not having that.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like this technology that you guys are all swearing by and seem to be using seems to have a lot of issues. And as we've seen with the creation of Moriarty, and then later on in Voyager with EMH, holographic technology doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of limits. And having sentient programs running around raises a lot of ethical questions. And when do they really cross the line between program to sentience? Because that seems to get blurred a lot. Now, granted, Moriarty's creation was indirectly intentional because of Geordie's phrasing or whatever. But I mean, they do this a lot. That's the other part of it too. And you've got these sentient programs that are just trapped in there forever. So how do you morally decide which ones get to exist and which ones don't? You know?
I'm gonna say it now. They should have killed the Moriarty program ASAP because he's a
You
super
know what?
villain.
I fervently agree. The moment that they were, I've always thought that too, and I've just never really voiced it. But the moment
Yeah,
that they were able to get him to capitulate and give them back control of the Enterprise and get out of the holodeck safely, they should have just carterized the wound, basically cut that
yes,
whole section out of the ship and
right,
toss it into the sun. As far as
right,
I'm concerned, like
yeah.
just don't ever go back in there again. Don't ever
Uh,
activate the
I'm just
program.
again. I don't know any of the history of the Borg beyond what I've seen so far, mainly on TNG. But if the Borg ever found that cube that Moriarty was put in, and they let just float out in space for all time, man, the
Oh no,
Borg would be that much worse.
they didn't let it. Now remember, they didn't let it float out in space
What
forever.
they do with it?
They made it into a contained, its own, like basically a mini holodeck. And
Right,
it was the program itself was a cube, and then they sat the cube down inside the space, which provided an unlimited amount of power and memory, so that
right,
they had tricked Moriarty to thinking that it was running inside this. And as
right.
long as nobody ever went and took that cube out and plugged it in anywhere else, it
Well,
could
that's my
run
point.
contained in this thing forever.
Well, that's my
But
point. If the Borg ever found it, can you imagine the
yeah,
Borg and
no, and that's
Moriarty?
but you're right, because then I'm assuming that after all that was done and they put it in this little container thing, they just shoved it in a storage bin somewhere on the ship. So yeah, another alien race, the Borg, the Romulans, somebody could have, raided the ship and found it, and then it would have had widespread repercussions elsewhere. Why they didn't, as soon as they
Right.
had it contained, they should have just went to the nearest star and chucks that thing right into the star and let it
Exactly.
let it burn up. And
Right.
that's it. Or just
Right.
put it on the deck and shoot it with a phaser, blow it up. He's
Right.
not a threat. You contained him.
Right.
Yeah. So many times there are so many issues in Trek that could have been solved with them being like, okay, kill it. Like, seriously, okay, die.
Garrett could have been a great asset in those moments.
Oh yeah. This is why there are certain characters on Next Generation that would never work on Deep Space Nine, and vice
Vice
versa.
versa.
And it's also obvious when certain characters are written a certain way that they would have worked better on one of the other shows,
Yeah.
and they stand out for that reason too. Like Ro Laren obviously would have been a great fit for Deep Space Nine. Vedic Bario, great fit for Next Generation, not for Deep Space Nine. Some several missed opportunities by not having these characters swapped. Ro Laren, we've talked about before, and I guess we're going to talk about again. She would have been great. I don't think she would have been. I don't think they would have been able to do an episode like this with her because it just would have been like so wildly out of character. So maybe it would have worked, but still, overall, she
Well,
should have been on Deep Space
the
Nine.
actress who plays her might have been a. It would have been a very just like Kira was a strange role reversal to see Kira in a
Mm.
nightgown and an evening dress. Yeah, Ro Laren would have been a similar experience. Ah, man, I love that character so much. I need to get to Picard so I can see her
I
again.
was going to say you need to hurry up and get to Picard then, because yeah, she was great.
Oh my gosh. Ugh. But yeah,
Uh,
so yeah, this episode was fun. But you were telling me before we started that you're like you don't like little green men, and you
no,
feel the same about it.
I feel the same about this episode. Not as hardcore as I do Little Green Men, but it's the same because a lot of the stuff is just this very, campy, nonsensical things. And I get it. This is supposed to be a parody. There are things that are going to be exaggerated. Yeah, yeah, I know. But whereas other people find those kind of wink and nod things enjoyable, I just don't. There are little bits and pieces here that I can appreciate, but overall, I've never really enjoyed things like that.
Mm.
Um, I if you want to tell that kind of story, then develop it properly. Give me like an actual story. I was
Right.
more interested in kind of the even though we don't really have a B story here, I was more interested in the what the guys in our universe were doing outside of the holodeck trying to solve the problem. I was way more interested in watching Eddington and Odo, Quark and Rom work together because that's not a pairing we have ever seen before.
Yes.
That quadruple group there, that quartet doing things was different, was weird,
Yes.
but
Yeah,
it was
Odo
great.
complimenting Quark on like you were right. That's
Yeah,
the right solution.
you were.
Rom is being his technically genius
It's
self.
a surprising genius. Here's this idiot that we've always. I mean, we saw little
Idiot
inklings
savant.
again
Yeah.
in Little Green Men. We saw little inklings that there was something else here too, Rom, and now we get to see it again. And he's the moron, but he's been keeping the hollow suites running because he's figured out
With a
components to make
spatula.
them work. Right. Not just because it's a spatula, but because it's made of a special material that's a great conductor. And
Yes.
just like things like that. Like it was great to see. And
Right.
you got Eddington still trying to like hold the station together and he's working from this position. But then you got Odo, who's in a surprising role kind of as caretaker of our missing crew members. He's
Right.
concerned about their health and their safety and their well-being and what we need to do to get them back to being who they really are. How do we
Right.
extricate them from the programs and stuff like that?
Right.
Whereas Eddington has really kind of taken over on the order and protocol and following the roles.
Right.
No one person is in charge, but
Right.
all of them working together help us to arrive at a solution. And I just thought that was great, and I wish we had seen more of that. I would have loved, especially to hear more from Rom as he was working through how to do certain things, and also to see more of Eddington and Odo because we already knew they had a bit of a tense relationship.
Yeah.
Considering they're both in security and who's the security chief and who's doing all that. So to see them kind of be forced to work together, that was an interesting angle that we never really got to explore here.
Explore. Yeah. And we actually had them talking together at the finale of last season when they were trying to find the one changeling and they were in the tubes, on the Defiant, and they were discussing like, can't you tell like where the other one is or where do you think he is? And Oda was like, I don't know his mind. I can't predict him.
I don't think
Yeah.
like him. I'm not him. Right?
Right.
Because he was like, where would you go? What would you be thinking? He's like, I don't know because I'm not him.
Right.
So we can see there's obviously tension, and this is the first time that we've seen them together really since then. There
Yeah.
have been other episodes, but not those two together doing things.
Yeah, and seeing Odo trying to solve a technical problem was interesting because he's never had to solve a technical problem like this
It's
before.
true.
Like seeing him working on stuff and like what kind of knowledge does Odo have about this? Yeah, it was actually fun to see them working together again, especially the Quark Odo Rom sort of trio, and then Eddington as their fourth wheel. Um, it was something that, yeah, if we had gotten more time with them, it could have been really interesting. Again, I love the Avery Brooks going crazy as a villain and chewing the scenery.
Like
Um,
I said, there are many
but
things to enjoy about the episode, but overall,
right,
I guess like for me, let me just say, I like a good story.
yes,
And I feel like the good story of this was how do we get them back to being
right,
themselves, being the real people.
right,
But we were so focused on the clever tongue in cheek and the innuendo and all the Dr.
yeah,
No, James Bond stuff that the true story was lost in all of that. And that I
right.
found um I upsetting. I didn't like it. So
Well, I
yeah.
would put it this way: this episode is absolutely skippable. It's been a hard time for me to think sometimes about which episodes are skippable. This one is the most skippable episode I've seen that I can at least say like, "Oh yeah, this is a skippable episode." The only thing you need to remember from this episode is that Garrick and Bashir got together closer as friends, like their friendship,
Yes,
and
their
maybe the
friendship was strengthened a bit here.
yeah, and maybe Odo and Cork have a new understanding for each other. And Rom, I mean, we've already heard that he's a genius when it comes to technical matters, and that's his
Yeah,
secret weapon almost. Is like he's actually really smart when it comes to technical things, and that's what's sad about his life is that
right.
as a Ferengi, he's always been pressured by his culture to be a certain way, but he's actually not that way. Um, but other than that, yeah, everything else is really skippable because of the nature of the
Which is
episode. So
which is funny that you say that it's skippable because it's often this episode is listed as a unskippable episode. One in like the top 15, top 20 unskippable episodes of Deep Space Nine. This one and of course Little Green Men pop up. And I feel like
huh.
they pop up because the people making these lists are analyzing them purely from like a more
This is a
pop
quirky
cultural,
episode.
right,
Yeah.
a pop cultural entertainment
You, as some
you know,
random person, could jump into this episode pretty easily.
right. You don't need to know anything about the lore of Trek at all to watch these episodes, therefore they're unskippable. Whereas if you're a person who has
It's the exact
been
opposite. Yeah, you're
right,
actually
or at
watching
least,
the
or even
show.
if
Yeah.
you have at least been following along with the overall storyline,
Right.
you
Yeah.
can definitely skip this episode because it does nothing. It
Right.
does nothing for the rest of the story,
Right.
you know.
We don't know
Um,
why the crew, our five characters, were at this meeting. Like, why were all the officers absent? It's not clearly stated why they were
we
all
don't,
gone
yeah,
at the
we don't
same
really
time.
get to that. We just know that
Why
there was
was
some
Dr.
kind of
Bashir not with them?
conference, which,
Yeah.
and again, makes it's another one of those issues too. That's a plot hole. If all of the other senior officers, Worf included, who is a new addition to the senior staff,
Right.
had to go to this thing, why didn't Dr. Bashir?
Well, and it's also strange because Kira is not a part of the Federation officer angle. She's from the
Yeah,
Bashir angle. So if anyone would have been there, it would have been Bashir and not Kira. Like all of
or
the Federation officers had to be off for a bit.
Or you can go even further on that and just be like, okay, you wanted to have all of your officers. Then again, why didn't Bashir go in O'Brien's day? O'Brien is a non-com.
Right.
If all the other officers went, Bashir should have gone. He is a
Yeah.
command level officer. He
Yeah.
should have gone. If
Right.
if O'Brien went, he should have gone. So
Right.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And it also doesn't make sense that if Kira goes, that Odo didn't go because Odo is the head of security. So again, if all of your department heads are going, why
Right.
are these two in particular staying there?
Yeah.
Now,
Why
of
would you
course,
leave the two co-heads again? I'm laughing
right.
as I say that of security, Eddington and Odo. Yeah.
Now, again, I get it. You know, someone's got to mind the store. Someone's got to be in command.
Right.
I totally understand that. However, in those situations, why did both the captain and the first officer go? You don't need both of them. There should have been one or the other. If the captain goes, first officer stays. That's how it's always been.
There are so
It's
many
very
missions
rare.
where the two of them both go, and I think that very question: why is
Yeah,
Kira on the Defiant? She should be back on the station. But
right. She
anyway,
should be on the station. She absolutely, there are several times where that comes up, and it's just like, I understand, I guess production wise, show wise, why they did it. But if
right.
you're wanting us to kind of follow in with this paramilitary structure here, then a lot of times one of them should be where the other one isn't. If
I
if if Cisco's on the Defiant, Kira should be at the station and vice versa.
it
You
part
know.
makes me think like TNG did a night crew episode. I remember where like they talked about how, like Data is in charge of like when everyone else is asleep, he's in charge of the bridge.
Hmm.
And it was like a one-time episode where like you're seeing some of the behind the scenes kind of how things run kind of episode. And I feel like there should be an episode like about that here for Deep Space Nine, where it turns out like there's a legit other set of officers that like
the
run the
the other
station.
guys,
Yeah,
the other
and
guys.
and of course, it always like the running gag would be that all of the interesting stuff always happens on the day shift, but the night shift is just there to like babysit the programs in the computer, and like they appear every now and then, but most of the time they're off screen. Um, And that would explain why Kira could go on missions because she's
That would
first officer during day shifts. But
right.
if they ever have to have someone go on the
That
Defiant, then she can
that
do
would
it
be a
toying
great
with.
episode, and like you could do it to where like there's always a crisis on the night shift, but you
It's
know how
solved
with
by
right, you know how like for like the day shift, it's always they have to solve the problem before the thing blows up.
right.
For the night shift, they have to solve the problem before day shift starts. So they'll be like, instead of the countdown being like 10 seconds to implosion, it'll be like 10
10
seconds to day
seconds.
shift. 10, 5 seconds to day shift. 4, 3, 2, and then like
They solve it.
the lift rises and up comes Cisco from the thing, they're all
Yeah.
like hastily wiping down stuff and pushing wires back up into the rafters and stuff and being like,
yeah.
"Ready for day shift, sir," and then hastily running off before,
That would be great.
anybody else gets there. That
That's
would be hilarious.
yeah. That's got to be like a. I haven't watched it, but what's that? The Orville show's got to have some sort of version of that. I bet.
I you know, between the Orville and, Lower Decks, I would say you get kind of a good feel for things like that. You see, like again, lower decks is these junior officers who, while all the senior command staff tries their best to always look so polished and self assured and in control, their
Right.
junior officers are a nervous wreck, and they're just kind of
Right.
running and bouncing off walls and stuff, trying to just hold it together long enough to make it to being off duty,
Right.
and then
Right.
yeah, the Orville is kind of like um, a more lighthearted next generation.
Right.
Now the Orville did like after the first, uh, I guess really after the first season, it really kind of like leaned more into being like next generation, and the stories became a bit more complex, a bit more serious. They still have their elements of humor, of course, but not nearly as much as they did in the first season. And then each season has gotten progressively more into actual, sci-fi and telling a good story and doing things and everything else. And I've really enjoyed it. Um, that show is obviously on hiatus and has been on hiatus. There's a massive campaign to bring it back for a fourth season. No announcements yet that I know of as to whether or not they're actually going to make it to a fourth season.
Right.
But I believe that the rights were purchased by Disney recently, if I'm not mistaken. So there
Disney.
is a potential that it will be on Disney.
Really?
Yeah, I believe that that's what it was. Either the Orville was purchased by Disney or Hulu is now Disney.
Well,
And
I
so
know Hulu
therefore,
and Disney has sort of a relationship, but
yeah,
does that mean they own it? I don't know if they own it or it's just like they've partnered with it. Like you get the Disney bundle, you can get Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN, and I
hmm
don't know if that's because they own Hulu or not, but
I think that they own it. I think that they own it now. Um, so yeah, so all the jokes are going around. So since the Orville was on Hulu and Hulu is now owned by Disney, does that make Captain Ed Mercer a Disney princess? Like that whole thing. Um, so But who knows? Maybe it'll be featured because there's a lot of shows are up on the chopping block right now for across all platforms: HBO, Hulu, Disney, all of them. All these shows that seem to have had at one point anyway pretty decent following
right.
um, are being non-renewed. I mean, Netflix is doing it as well, but Netflix has always done that. Their shows now, if they make it past the third season, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Netflix loves ending shows in the third season
Right.
and then doing something else. So
Right.
yeah, Netflix has been doing that for a while, but now it seems like the others are kind of following suit. They're ending a lot of shows that have been around 4 or 5 seasons, and then other shows are not getting renewed for a fourth season. They seem to be stopping at three. And then that kind of opens them up. I know there's been a lot of negotiating for like shows to jump platforms to come to other ones, but even with all that going on, we still also have the writer strike going on. So even if they do purchase some of these shows, you're probably not going to see new episodes of anything for a while
Right.
because the writer strike is keeping everybody from doing moving forward with any kind
I
of real
still find that whole thing just interesting, but
I
it's what it
still
is.
don't like I still don't like the result of the first writer strike back in
Uh,
2008. I know
Did
that
we
it was
complain about movies? Did we talk about how bad they were? Like Transformers: Age of Extinction, or what is it? Revenge of the Fallen. How I hated it. Did we
yes,
talk about
I
that?
do remember that. We did have
We did.
discussion
Okay.
about the
Yeah.
Transformers
Okay.
movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, that first writer strike, to me, we had the shows that a season was again 24 to 26 episodes. Now we're lucky if we get 13. Like most of them now, it's a standard 10. You might get
Right.
13 if there's something unusual about whatever else going on. But other than that, that's it. You
Right.
know. And I understand that it was hard work on everybody and the actors and everything else, but come on, that they were well paid for a lot of this stuff. I mean, a lot of them um, made their retirements on these
Yeah.
shows. And how many of them now, thanks to the glory of conventions and all the rest of it, we hear them now years later talk about how much they would love to go back
Mm.
and do another season or do another show or whatever else. It's like, wait a second, you can't do both. You can't complain the whole time and then you want to go back. Marina Sirtis, Deanna Troy, has said multiple times that um, she was sad when the show ended, and that if she had her way, they would still be filming and releasing new
New
episodes to this
seasons.
day. Right.
Yeah.
She loved going back to the set and doing things for Picard and everything else, and that she wished that they had never stopped. So, I mean, and she's not the only one. The others have totally agreed with her on that. So I'm like, okay, do you really think that you had 30 years in you to run
Yeah.
the show?
Right.
Because uh, there was a time when you said the opposite. So I'm just saying, I just kind of wish that we could at least get 20. I'd be happy with 20 episodes a season. Because I swear, now we spend so much time in the shows in the beginning establishing stuff that by the time you finally get to the main part of the story and the action and everything else, you're 7 episodes in.
Right.
So now you've only got 3 episodes, and then you have to wait until season two, which doesn't come out for like another year and a half. Jesus, like I'm finally interested in your show, and I've got nothing,
Right.
and it sucks to me. That's what I don't like. Don't walk me all the way up to the cliff, and then just when I get there, push me off, and I don't have a parachute.
Right.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
So that's just my little mini why I don't like the strike. I don't know the full reason why they're striking. I'm not saying they don't have legitimate reasons to strike. Maybe they do. I don't know all that. I'm just saying that some of the things that came out of the strike the first time were not necessarily good things
Right.
for us viewers.
Right.
Which I mean, I'm sure people are like, "Well, we don't care about you." And okay, I guess you know, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
um, favorite moment of our man Bashir. What would you say it is?
Well, we haven't talked about the one moment I thought was really also silly. Bashir is going up to Worf, who's playing the French guy, as you said, and he's all like, "You have to pay me 5 million francs to go see Doctor Noah." And he's like, "Fine." And he pulls out his wallet. And he puts 100 down, like 100 down, and he's like, "I'll play you for it." And then he plays Worf and wins the 5 million francs or whatever.
Mm.
And he's like, "Fine, you could go see him." And then he does the like, I thought it was kind of fun where he does like the cigar where it like
The
has got the
cigar with the
sleep
noxious sleep
noxious.
gas. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Like, oh yeah, it's a spy thing. Like, he's got a special cigar in his pouch that he can use to knock people out. But like, I was like, there's no henchman who would ever be like, okay, I'll play you for like a pittance of whatever it is, and you're gonna win, and then I'm
Right.
gonna let you go see the guy. Like, that's not how that works. And then
Yeah,
yeah,
because it's
when
like there's literally nothing in this for Worf.
exactly,
He
exactly.
he gets nothing.
Yeah, and then his assistant, who's she's got a degree in biology and geography and this and
Oh,
that
Miss
and
Miss
those, and
loves it. She
yeah,
speaks 7 languages. She's got a
yeah,
degree in sociology and xenobiology, but she's great at tailoring my suits. Thanks,
yeah. She
honey.
makes a great martini. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and it just really nails home. Like again, when he is talking to
that's that
Dax,
60s mindset. about
Yeah.
women, and in a
Well,
weird way, it
again,
also
if it was a male fantasy, it's like okay, like, but it really just shows like, yeah. Anyway, you were
yeah,
saying it. I
it's just
shouldn't
like
interrupt you.
again, it's like we don't care about all of your fancy pants degrees. We want you to look
To
good
make a
in a
martini.
suit jacket and I mean, I don't even know what was the rest that she was wearing.
Oh, she
Like
yeah, a
she had on the
pencil
boots
skirt.
that
Yeah.
right, or she, showed all the leg and everything else, and it's just like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, she
why
says,
did you
"Do you
tell
need
me that
anything
she
else? Do you need
right
anything else?" And Bashir looks her up and down at her breasts, and
her
then looks up and
cleavage?
says, "Yeah," and
No, you're
says,
good.
"I'll let you know." Like,
Right.
and then again, when the thing turns around and Kira's on there, she's in a nightgown and she's
Mm-hmm.
been waiting for him. And when she goes to pick up the file, she goes, "I wish I could help you relax." And like
Right.
stretches out and then grabs the file and pulls it forward and says, "Oh, I have some information for you." Like, and then again, Dax, the whole like, before I die, I just want to see that lovely face of yours. Take off your glasses for me. And Garrick is like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Right.
And
What's
Bashir's like,
going on
"Shut
here?
up! I know what I'm doing." And it's just like so clear that like, yeah, Bashir has done this a lot. He's been
Right.
in this program a number of times, as
Well,
Garrick says.
and that's what
Garrick,
Garrick says. Garrick's
yeah,
like, since you got this program, you
you have
have
free
ran it
time.
frequently, and you've told no one, which for a man like you is telling in and of itself.
Yes.
Yeah, he calls him out on it pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and I
like best moment again is Cisco chewing or Avery Brooks chewing it up as Dr. Noah. Um and again Garrick giving Bashir a hard time. And then finally, as we've said, the Odo, Quark, Nog,
mhm.
Eddington quartet um, working together in a way that we wouldn't expect otherwise. But yeah, again, I've said it before, it's skippable. This is a skippable episode. If you had to
Well,
pass
there
it,
are
that's an
yeah,
episode
there
up.
are several people who don't agree with you. But I do agree with you. I think that this is definitely a one and done. You don't have to come back to this one for anything. It
Right.
doesn't do anything. And then like the next episode that we're gonna watch is a great episode, and it's just like it's kind of the same with
So for
Little Green
you,
Men.
this
Yeah,
season is
it's this is the kind of the roller coaster. We're just like we have these extreme highs, then we hit these weird, lows, these weird valleys. At least for me, and I
yeah,
just kind of, suffer through it. But this is also these things to me are also the point. Like while I recognize that this is an episode that I don't enjoy, we're at episode 10. We've got
right,
16 more episodes in this season,
right,
just this season that
right,
we're going to get to, go over and watch. And there's a lot of great things about them, but I feel like you appreciate those great moments more when you have things like this. But when you only have 10 episodes and six of them are duds, it's
right.
just like I feel cheated. I feel like I've wasted my time. I didn't need to watch those other episodes where all you did was show me people, I don't know, complaining about stuff all the time until they finally got to the main, point. Like I can't stand, and these are everywhere too. The cop procedurals, where everybody's in, training at the LAPD Academy or the FBI Academy or the CIA Academy or whatever it is. And the whole first 7 episodes, it's everybody, how they got picked, why they're overly qualified, why they're hypersexed, and then finally what the major conflict is. It's like, okay, well, I had to suffer through like 6 hours before you finally tell me what the main conflict is. And now I hate everybody and I don't care what your main conflict is. I hope you all die of whatever it is that is going to be affecting you later on. You're worthless people. What was that show? They did one, Quantico. That was an FBI show, and that show was insufferable for that. And I'm glad that it's off the air because it was awful. It was awful. So,
Yeah.
man, don't let me get out there. There might be a different kind of writer strike. Well, I pretty much feel like we covered everything about this one and dash extra with some other things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
as we said, overall skippable episode, but no big deal. You should still watch it if you've
yeah,
never seen it. And then if hey, if you disagree with anything either one of us has said, please
yeah,
feel free to let me know.
right,
Let us know. We
yeah,
would love to, talk about it a little bit more. Maybe there's something I didn't watch right, and maybe that will help me appreciate it more. I don't know. I doubt it,
right.
But let me know. We'll see.
Right.
Other than that, as we said before, you can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify, and we are on all the social medias except for Twitter, which will probably implode any day now. So, but until next time, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.